What's up, guys? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast. I'm Larry Hagner, your host and founder of this show. You know, we're at the end of July, and I wanted to share a story with you guys as it pertains to knee-jerk reactions, losing your cool, saying the words, "because I said so," and reframing when we teach our kids something or we ask them to do something is to ensure that we share with them why they're doing what they're doing. And I'm gonna go over a couple different points on this particular topic because I think that they're really important. So I want to share a story with you guys on an episode or a situation I had with my 13-year-old. And just to give you some context of the personality that my 13-year-old has, he truly is a competitive, type A, stubborn, challenges the status quo. And I have to tell you, man, I love that about him. And it also, as his father, it drives me crazy, right? So let's first, I'm going to tell you the story, and then I'm going to break down that portion of the stubbornness and challenging the status quo, the blessings and the curses that go with that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a story that I'm not so proud of when I asked him to cut the grass and he really challenged me on it and the way I reacted. And then I'm going to share a conversation with him after the fact that was a humble apology, and it was also a lesson that I had to teach him about leadership. And the lesson on leadership is always ensuring that the people that you're leading is what they're doing. Why are they doing it? Why is it important to them? Why is it important to the mission that they need to complete? Why is it important to the task that needs to be done and needs to be done correctly? But it goes back to them understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if you read Jocko Willink's book, Dichotomy of Leadership, there's an entire chapter on this, is making sure that your team understands the why behind the mission and why it's important. So I'll share this story with you. So my 15-year-old and 13-year-old, they take turns cutting grass at our house. And my 13-year-old has the personality. He's like I shared with you before. He's very competitive, very type A, does really well in school, plays football. But when he doesn't want to do something, as human beings, you know, a lot of us don't, right? He'll question why he has to do it. It doesn't make sense for me to do it. Not only that, but like he just doesn't want to do the hard work sometime. And I don't say that as a blackball on him. That's a human nature thing, right? Comes down to discipline. Comes down to completing things right the first time, comes down to work ethic. And us as human beings, we strive for comfort, right? So let me share with you this story. So I asked my 13-year-old, I was like, hey, it's your day to cut the grass. Please go out and cut the grass. And just to give you some background of the story is the front definitely needed to be done, but the back was like, so. It really wasn't growing that fast, but it was uneven and it didn't look good. So after doing the front, he came in, he's like, hey, do I really have to do the back? It's really not that long. And I was like, yeah, you have to do the back. And he's like, well, it's not that long. Like literally if I just mow over it, like it's just probably going to look the same. So I don't even need to do it. I was like, no, you need to do it. And I was in that moment that I think all of us get into, which is I was trying to do too many things at once. I had a lot of things coming at me and I was frazzled a little bit. I don't like being in that headspace. And doing this work for as long as I've done it, I recognize when I feel that way. I'm very aware of it. But when I'm tested over and over and over again, sometimes I don't respond the way that I want. But here's one thing I am good at. I am good at apology. And maybe that's because I've done it so many times, because I've made so many mistakes. But here's what happened. So he came in, he's like, well, the back really doesn't need to be done. And he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. I'm talking like 9-10 times, kept pushing. Like, I shouldn't have to do this. It doesn't even need to be done. And I said, listen, you have to do it because I said you have to do it. I'm your father. Not only that, it's your turn to do it. stop cutting corners and go do it. And he just looked at me like, but I don't understand. But he'll go out and do it anyway. Now, when you're leading people like that, whether it's your kids, whether it's your team, I want you to think for a moment if you had a boss like that and he spoke to you like that or she spoke to you like that and how you would feel walking away from that conversation. There was never any explanation of why it needed to be done. I didn't explain to him that the grass it's not very long, but it's uneven. It doesn't look good. It needs to be trimmed. It hasn't been trimmed in a while. And if we let it, the rain is coming. So we were going to have 6 straight days of rain after he was going to cut the grass. So I knew the grass was going to get even longer and shaggier. I didn't tell him any of that stuff. So he went outside, probably was like, my dad is such a jerk. I don't understand. And he had this really poor attitude. And like literally when you're doing something like cutting grass and you have a lot of time to think, there's probably going to be some not so pleasant thoughts that come up when you're cutting grass about your old man in that conversation you just had. And I thought about that for a moment. And I was like, that was really the wrong thing. That was really poor leadership on my part. Really poor leadership. I need to have a conversation with him when he's done. So he came inside and I sat down with him. And the two things I really wanted to explain here are the blessing and the curse of challenging the status quo and being stubborn, right? Because there's a balance there. And always explaining why it's important for that person or the person that you're leading to explain to them why this mission is important. So he came inside and I said, hey, do you mind if we talk for a minute? He's like, am I in trouble? Like literally that was his first question. I said, no, you're not in trouble. I was like, but we do need to talk because I need to apologize to you. And he kind of looked at me and I was like, so sit down. We talked and I said, listen, there's a couple things you should know here. Number one is this. I love the fact that you question pretty much everything. You're not necessarily a yes man when it comes to things that you don't agree with. And I told him, I was like, as you navigate life, if you don't agree with the status quo, it is your responsibility to raise your hand and question it. And there's a way to question it, right? And especially in different situations. If you're in a work environment and your boss tells you to do something that is important to your mission, the mission of the company, and you don't fully understand why you're going to do what it is that you're going to do, you have to be respectful in how you're going to ask why. And how you asked why when you were in here was you were frustrated, you were infuriated, and kind of rude about it, right? There's a way to ask for clarity if you don't understand, right? And there's also a way, which is the second part, for me to explain it that brings that clarity. So I told him I think it's so important, and I think it's so incredible that you don't go along with the crowd always. I've seen him for years now. I have Bark on his phone, so I see alerts and conversations when he's peer pressured into doing something. And the thing that I love and appreciate about him so much is he always stands his ground for what he believes in. He's very stubborn. And that stubbornness is a blessing and a curse, right? We can be very, very stubborn, but that also creates some discipline, right? No, I'm going to do this, or no, I'm not going to do this. And I think it's our job as fathers that if we have a strong-willed child, you've got to groom the good things about that personality, and you also have to help, course correct the ship when it's offline, right? Because there are ways to ask for clarity, and there's ways to challenge the status quo that's not going to be disrespectful. So I shared with him about that, and he's like, you're right. I wasn't very nice about that, and I was kind of frustrated. He's like, and the more you told me, just go do it because I said so, the more frustrated I got. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I was like, so and this is exactly what I told him. I said, this is something that's so important for leadership, Mason. When you're leading people, I didn't say if, I said when you're leading people, because our kids lead people. When you're leading people and you ask them to do something, or they're required to do something, and if they don't want to do it, Or proactively, the best way to go is to always inform people before they have a chance to ask why it's important for them to understand, why is this task important to the success of the mission, the project, whatever it is that you're working on. And so this is what I told them. I was like, I did a really poor job on that leadership skill. I didn't share with you why it was important that you cut the backyard, but here's why it's important. The backyard is all uneven. Yes, it's short in some places, in most places, but it's high in others. And it just needed to be evened out. It also needed to be trimmed. It just needed to match the front. And why it's important is because we're about ready to get 6 straight days of rain, and the back hasn't been cut in a couple of weeks, and it's going to grow even more, uneven out back there. It's going to look terrible. And I was like, so I didn't explain that we're getting 6 days of rain, it hasn't been cut in a while, and it needs to be evened out. And he looked at me, and you just saw the light bulb go off, the aha moment. He's like, oh. He said, well, that makes total sense. He goes, okay. And he gave me this pretty cool feedback. He's like, to be honest, if you would have told me that right off the bat, I wouldn't have argued, because I would have agreed. And that just gave me such an aha moment that it's so important for our kids to understand, why are they doing what they're about ready to go do? And for us to be very, very clear with that, right? Why is it important to us? Why is it important to the family? Why is it important to them? And sometimes even bringing them into the conversation. Why is this important to you? Right? Because when people have skin in the game around the why, they're much more likely to go execute. The other point, and I hit this home earlier, was if you have a strong-willed child, our job as fathers is not to beat that out of them. That's a characteristic trait that can serve them in a profound manner as they navigate life. Yes, men don't change the world. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. They don't. Yes, men don't change the world. Men that challenge the status quo and think differently, women too, those are the people that change the world. And it's our job as fathers to guide them of how to sharpen that skill of being strong-willed and questioning the status quo and being respectful about it. And it's also our job to course correct when maybe they're not doing it properly, not doing it the right way, right? Because we can challenge the status quo and it can be received by others of the world or your company or whatever in a really poor way, but that's not the way we change the world, is by being disrespectful, yelling and screaming and fighting and all that stuff. There's ways that we can do it that will change people, cultures, everything out there in the world, right? So I want to share that story because it was not a cool moment for me. I always swore as a father, I was like, I'm not going to be that guy who says, because I said so, because I'm your dad, I'm right, you're wrong, because I'm your father, the end. That's the way I was raised, and that's not the way I'm raising my kids. If you're listening to this show, chances are you're in that camp as well. So gentlemen, that's all I have for you today. I want to share that story of when you're leading, people that you're leading need to know why they're doing what they're doing. That's really important. Also, for us to not be so reactionary of because I said so. And the final thing that I'll say is if you have a strong-willed child, don't forget, there's a gift there. There's a gift there. Don't forget that. All right, gentlemen, that's all I got for you today. And this is the end of July. We're jumping into August. And as we close out here, one final announcement. We are moving over to thedadedge.com. So moving from gooddadproject.com over to thedadedge.com. And that starts next week. Gentlemen, thank you for all your support. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for all the reviews on the podcast. Thank you for making the Dad Edge podcast the #1 dad podcast on Apple. Appreciate you all. Have an amazing weekend and live legendary, gentlemen. Take care.